Last week we kicked off the championship at Barcelona, where both races were rather tame for the usual Thursday championship. This week though, we're back at Paul Ricard for the second round of the GT4 and BMW M2 Cup. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Thursday Cup. I'm Tim Peck, joined by Joshua Devonshire and Christian Strick on the broadcast. Joshua, welcome to Thursdays.
I mean, we had a little conversation before we went live, and it's certainly a lively one. And well, thank you for having me. It's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, kicking off with Paul Ricard, interesting choice, but hey, it's racing, right?
I mean, it's a nice track. I think it's not a lot of people's favourites. Obviously, it's one of those ones that people often turn their nose up at, but it's a classic track. When you think of ACC, I'd say this is one of the 5 main tracks you'd consider to be a Assetto Corsa Competizione track. And, well, for those of you that are here already, welcome to qualifying. We're going to kick right into it today because Christian was late on the broadcast, and I'm going to call him out for it. But here's qualifying. To give you the rundown of how it works, we've currently got the GT4s out on track at the moment. Actually, no, we've got the M2s out. No, we are. Wait, what's out on track at the moment? Is it the M2?
That's Helmet at the M2 Cup, yeah.
Okay, so that's the M2. Right, so we've got the M2 out on track at the moment. They're going to do their 10 minutes of qualifying. Then we'll have 1 minute where we swap everyone round. The GT4s will go out and they'll set their fastest time. But right now, as you said, Joshua, these are the M2s doing their qualifying runs for the day.
I think it's going to be an interesting one because I know obviously that these cars are going to qualify in different positions and places because that's just the nature of multi-class. But I think during the race, it's going to be really interesting to see how these cars kind of approach each other, especially on the main straight, because I'm not sure what the speed differences between these two cars are. I mean, the DLC is relatively recent, and I actually only picked it up the other day, so I've been a bit out the loop, but I think, the M2s, the BMWs of the GT4s have all offered great racing to begin with, and I think that's going to be the theme for tonight.
Well, I'll give you a little spoiler of that between the speed between the M2 and the GT4. The M2 is significantly slower. We've talked about in the past how GT4s used to be considered the slowest car. Now the M2 has really hit that out the window, and I can guarantee, probably in race 1, but definitely in the feature race for race 2, there will be a lot of blue flags being waved to let the GT4s through. But it makes for some interesting racing, having both of the classes out on track at the same time, having the blue flag to really mix up the race. It adds a lot of entertainment value, and I'd argue that the mix of GT4 between M2 is one of the most interesting class mixes we have on RCI.
Oh yeah, and even as a driver, the strategic options it opens up as in terms of timing, how you approach the car ahead of you. If you're in one of the GT4s approaching one of the touring cars, or GT3 approaching GT4, any faster class approaching slower class, you can kind of time the overtake a little bit to sort of be advantageous for you, but detrimental to the car behind. It's trying to use the traffic to kind of put a car between yourself and the cars, and between yourself and the cars that are racing. And you can really kind of pull a gap for that, as we see Haleman knocking one of the apex markers off at T1 there.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the part of blue flags that will come into play today is how you clear these M2s. And one thing that we've talked about in the previous championships is how slow the M2 is on the acceleration in particular. The top speed as well isn't great, to be honest, but the acceleration is where the M2 is really, really lacking, and you do notice it. So if you can time it so that you've cleared the M2 as you come through the corner, and then the person behind you is maybe coming out just behind, you can really slow the guy behind you down simply because they're waiting for the M2 to get up to speed.
Yeah, it's definitely going to make for some interesting decisions and good racing as well. I mean, I can imagine that the M2s are going to be really tight with themselves as well, obviously not relying on the aero much like the GT4s. So you can really kind of hang it really quite close to each other, and that's what you want to see with touring car racing.
Yeah, the car definitely doesn't have a lot of aero, especially compared to the GT4. We talk about it a lot. The aero itself isn't great to begin with. These cars tend to lose grip around a lot of the medium-sized corners, and they do struggle a lot with even the small corners as well. But the other thing that brings into play is their tyre performance. Now, we were obviously talking to Jesse Lee before the broadcast started, and Jesse was saying that on this M2, if you go out and absolutely destroy those tyres within the first 1, 2, even 3 laps, that will be the worst tyres to drive on for the rest of the race, and you will regret it because you will feel it, and it will absolutely cost you the entire time. And well, it looks like for the most part, a lot of the M2s right now have managed to save enough tyre to get some good times out there. Obviously, Benjamin Harman is currently on provisional pole. They've got a time of a 2:11.4, and then Bock behind them is about 5/10 off. As Harman actually goes a little bit quicker there, but Bock's about 5/10 off right now. So a bit of a mix-up in the field already. You can see that gap sort of between 2nd and 8th is quite tight. They're all within the 5/10 of each other. But the key here, Joshua, I'd say, from watching these M2 cars for a couple of seasons now, is make sure your tyres are always in as good a condition as possible, because if you don't have good tyres, you're going to feel it.
Oh yeah, I mean, that front end graining and that front end wash, especially over the course of a longer race, it's going to come into play. And you know at that point in time, you don't want to burn up your tyres trying to mess with the cars, especially in the multi-class. You don't want to build the tyres messing with the cars that are quicker than you. You just kind of want to find your own kind of clear air and just kind of get on with your race, really. And it seems like a lot of these guys are doing that at the moment. I mean, Hellman coming out, half a second ahead. I mean, I know it's a little bit. Actually, how far are we through qualifying? Because the GT4s, I presume, are coming out in about 3 minutes. If I remember, yeah. So that's where I remember this format working. So they've only got 3 minutes to make to get another time in, and Hellman, half a second is fairly significant.
Yeah, that half a second sort of buffer is going to be really comfortable for Hellman, because obviously they've done a really good lap at the beginning, and it just means that whilst everyone's trying to improve their time to get close, they can play around with the track a little bit. I mean, Hellman now can sort of push some corners to the limit, really see where they can find extra speed, and they've got a bit of playing time. Waldecker's just closed the gap a little bit here. They've gone and done a 2:11.7, but again, there's still room there, and it's still a fairly decent gap. I think Hellman's going to be very happy with that performance. Of course, we were talking about last week, Hellman came into this championship really confidently, said they were going to win every race. Now, it didn't turn out that way last week. They had a couple of unfortunate circumstances, but I've got to say, coming into Paul Ricard today, Hellman definitely looks like the confident person that was talking before Barcelona.
Yeah, I mean, the confidence is like everything that you need around, especially in something like this, but I believe Bock is up on their time, and they all slip across the line, and where are we going to be? They're still only half a second out, but Hellman's had a bit more time since as well. I mean, the Waldecker had pulled up to about 2/10, and now it's another half second. Healy was also on for another good time according to my timesheet, but we have just seen them go wide. Again, another note, Dom Healy, apparently another name that used to knock around these parts a little bit, but it's really, really good to see a return of. Yeah, there's Hellman pulling in now. It seems to be they think they've done all they can do, and I think we're going to start just seeing the last of the last of the M2s trying to just find that little bit more time, pull up a few more positions, and can anyone? I mean, Bock is still out there. Can they take on Hellman?
Yeah, of course, a lot of the M2s now will be crossing the line for the final time. They've only got 1 minute and 12 seconds left in their qualifying, so they've got to find that time quickly. And as we've said, Hellman has just found some really good pace so far around this track, and they've still got, like you said, they've improved their time more. It's a 2:11.1 now. It's another 5/10 gap to Waldecker behind, so I'd say Hellman has done a very comfortable lap, and that's why we've seen them go back to the pits here and just call it a day for the qualifying. But for the rest of them, they've still got about a minute to set the best possible time they can, and that's what a lot of these guys are going to do. One person in particular we're watching right now, Ian Marshall. Now, you can see currently they are in a different split to the rest of the people above them. Of course, we're running both a pro and an AM split here in the same session. Now, what Marshall's going to try and do is what they've started to do already, which is they're going to try and put as many pro cars between them and their nearest competitor to hope that once all the cars get going, Marshall doesn't have to worry. If Ardito passes Marshall's not losing points. They're still in first place in their split, and that's something that we see a lot in this championship, is people using the other drivers in the other splits as a buffer just to make sure that they can secure a place for as long as possible.
Yeah, it falls back on the same vein as I was saying before about the multi-class racing. It's, for sure, it definitely still counts with drivers in the same class as you but different split. It's quite an intricate kind of ranking system when you look at it on the surface. but it's one of those. It makes for some really interesting races, really interesting strategies, and it really kind of groups people together as well. And and as a driver, it's nice knowing kind of where your pace is in comparison to the other splits. If you're in the AM split and you're running with the pros, maybe then that's something that for you to consider. Actually, maybe I'm ready to step up, as we see Reshinov going up to P4, only 0.63 seconds behind Hellman. I mean, it's still a bit of a gap, but that's a big jump.
It's a big jump, and I'm sure Rachel's going to be really, really happy with how that turned out. Of course, like we were saying, that sort of the positions 2nd to 8th, they're a lot closer than Heilman is to the rest of the group. So I'd say that's where the most fighting is going to happen, is in that gap between 2nd and 8th place there, I think, is where we're going to see a lot of the action based on how that qualifying went. But, well, now you can see the GT4s are out on track. We've got 8 minutes and 47 seconds left of this qualifying session, which means it's the GT4's turn to set the quickest lap they can. And, well, as Christian, our broadcaster, just said into our ears, Joshua, they look seriously quick compared to the M2s.
Oh yeah, it looks like an entirely different race. I mean, I suppose it is an entirely different race, but yeah, no, these things are rapid in comparison. You can see that straight away. Obviously, a bit more aero, a bit more mechanical grip, a bit more power, a bit more everything really, and that's kind of what you want to see.
Yeah, it certainly mixes up the racing a little bit. And like I said, once these cars all start to mix together later, it becomes really, really interesting with how the GT4s have to navigate around the M2 cars here. And, well, they may be quick, but they're still not quick enough to get around the track as fast as the GT3s. But again, I think we were saying this last week, if you put the GT3s and the M2s in the same session, that would be chaos. And I reckon you can see blue flags appearing basically from lap 5 onwards. I mean, there's such a huge gap in the speed here, but a lot of the GT4s now crossing the line. They've just done their outlap. And like I was saying earlier about the tyres on the M2, and you have to really conserve them in the first few laps just to make sure they're still in like a good performance area and you can push the best laps possible. The GT4s, they have that problem in the same sort of way, but definitely not as much. You can really chew up the tyres in the GT4, and they should still last a significant period of time, especially in qualifying. I mean, 10 minutes, you're probably getting 4, maybe 5 good laps in here, and the GT4 tyres, they should last the entirety of that, so they can be a lot more aggressive going around these corners.
Oh yeah, and especially the GT4s as well. Even if you chew up the tyres in the first few laps in a longer setting like a race, just driving smooth can help just brush off whatever graining is on the first surface of the tyre, and you can bring the tyre life back to some extent. Where, from what we've been told through Jesse even, that's just not the case with the M2s at all.
Yeah, the M2, Jesse was saying, you do one lap, and if you do that lap really overly aggressively, you chew up the tyres, that's it for the rest of the race. You can't slow down and just try and ease them back into that sweet spot. You have ruined your tyres, and that's something that we see. It happens a lot in this championship. Of course, we have one 20-minute race, and then it's followed by a second race, which is double the length. It's 40 minutes long, and it's worth double the amount of points. But not so much in the 20-minute race, but definitely in that 40-minute race, you get to that 30-minute mark and the tyres just fall off completely, and that's when the M2s really start to struggle. So that will provide an interesting ending, let's say, to the feature race, because these M2 cars, they've got to make sure those tyres last as long as possible. And as we've discussed, if you're not already saving them from lap 1, you're going to really feel it later on.
Oh yeah, but at the end of the day, though, that just means better racing for us, and more things to shout into a microphone over, really. Yeah.
And there will be a lot of shouting later, you can guarantee that. Verstappen has now set their first time. It's a 2:05.0, so almost breaking into the 2:04s as Verstappen. Svenschik comes in behind, Kui as well, Goat 2. You can see them just slotting in the gap a lot tighter than it was for the M2s as Fischer comes in with a 2:04.69. So I reckon we'll see a lot of these guys towards the top of the GT4s will be setting those 2:04 times. And I think coming across the next 5 minutes, Joshua, what we're looking for here for a good lap from the GT4 is a 2:04, maybe on the lower end. I'd like to see a 2:04.5 to really secure a pole position here.
Yeah, that seems to be about where things are going to be. I mean, Bart Mathieu with a 2:06.3 that lap, putting them in 11th place in the number 5 McLaren. The McLarens look really, really quick at a straight line here as well, and that's going to make all of the difference going down the main straight. And that's another thing I wanted to bring up. You've got cars like the KTM here, which, they're not I mean, I'm not seeing any genetics out there, but that would kind of amplify my point a little bit. Now, some of these cars in the straight line really aren't like the most effective, shall we say, or the strongest. So it's going to be really interesting with the GT4s, with it being a non-same make series. Just seeing the differences coming down the main straight here.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I believe we had a GNS last week, but they seem to have not showed up today. But the KTM, like you said, definitely not the fastest in the straight line. That is going to be something that Samir Foch will have to consider, because you don't have that same speed, and Paul Ricard has 2 very long straights. It's 3 if you count the other one. So realistically here, you want a car with a lot of top speed. If you're an M2 Cup car, you don't have to worry because everyone's in the same class as you, in the same car type. But like you just said, there are different manufacturers here in the GT4s, and that is going to play a huge part. And I got to say, if we're talking about it in that way, Daly here has a huge advantage being in a BMW, which is known for being the fastest GT4 in a straight line. Daly might be loving the overtaking today, because against people like Foch in the KTM and Watts in the Alpine, they're going to have an absolutely glorious time once they hit the straights. Oh
yeah, and the thing for Daly as well, that M4, that handles as well. It's really compliant on the curves. You can see it on the camera now. The disadvantage is that you saw as Daly hits the brakes there for the final turn, the front lurches forwards, and that can upset the balance of the car sometimes. But for the most part, it's a really curb compliant, really pliable car in the corners as well. So I could maybe not, even with the quality performance, sitting where they're set now in P9, in the race, that could make all the difference.
That certainly could, and I think I'm surprised to see the BMWs so far down. I think Borodai's driving one as well. They're currently in 5th at the moment, but honestly, if you had to give it to a certain type of car today, I'd have said the BMW GT4s all the way would be just loving this. But right now, it looks like Aston Martin's the car to be in, as Fisher's set 204.697. Never mind, that's what they had anyway. I thought I saw someone fight them a little bit for pole there, but I guess not. But still, Fisher holding on to that pole. They're now doing what we were talking about Harman doing in the M3, which is just, it's their chance to get around the track, really push those corners to the limit, see how quick you can get your foot on the accelerator as well. And now is the time to do a bit of experimenting. You've got that safety lap in that has a good enough time to put you on pole, and now you really get to push the car to the limit and see just how fast you can go.
Oh yeah, and that's it. You're sort of late into the session now. You kind of, as you say, you build that. I'm just repeating what you're saying, really, but just building that buffer out in front. A driver I want to bring some attention to is Stephen Quay in the 26 Camaro in P6. Currently, according to my timesheet, about roughly half a second, 4/10 half a second up on their time. And that's another car that I can imagine around here, so fast in a straight line. Maybe suffers a bit more in the corners, about to cross the line. With my Delta, that it looks like they are going to improve. And that's only up to... There we are, P4. There we go. That's what I was... And then Andy Boardman just coming in casually as well and just going provisional P2. 0.2 of a second off of Fisher. So... Yep, Fisher is also up on their time, crossing the line as well. It's a bit of a cluster coming across the line here, and... Yep, there we go. It's a 204.5, so going roughly a 10th quicker. I mean, it's just got to be really close, I think, for the race.
Yeah, and you can see this is the lap where a lot of people are starting to find bits of time here and there. There's a lot of green deltas on my screen for the different drivers right now. And something I wanted to talk about as well is just for those of you that have been around with RCI for a while, have watched our previous GT4 championships, there are a lot of names here that you will recognise. You have Fischer, you have Boardman, Verstappen, Schwenchik, Quay, Foch, the top 6 in particular, and then even going down Borodai, Daly, Eraser, they show up a lot in these GT4 championships, and all of them are very good drivers. You always see them on that podium in nearly every race. So the fact that we've got all these big names, there's about 8 big names I'd say in the GT4 right now, and it shows you how competitive the field is going to be today. I can almost guarantee that the fight for the top 6, I'm going to say, in the GT4s, it's going to be very tense and exciting as all of these drivers just try to show us exactly what they're capable of.
Oh yeah, I mean, as you said, there's a ton of talent here as well. These are the guys as well that they're not just quick. The racing from these guys, the quality of the racing tends to be like up there. Like you're not going to
Oh yeah,
find
100%.
you're not going to find the potential for better racing than the grid we have now. And in these cars, you can get really close. You know, there's less aerodynamics, less aerodynamical inefficiencies with following cars in the GT4s even, and you can follow right up close, and it's going to be great, guys.
Yeah, we always see some brilliant battles between the GT4s, and well, with a field like this, you know you're in for a good show. We're coming into the end of qualifying now, so most of these drivers are going to be looking to improve on their laps, although looking at the deltas right now, I'm not sure anyone's doing too hot. We're watching what's currently there, about 2/10 up on their time coming through the final section of corners here. We'll see if that's enough to improve them. I think it's only going to be enough to bunny hop into 13th place, but we'll watch as they come across the line here to see if the Alpine's done enough. They've actually just been pushed down, so they're going to only be able to bunny hop into 14th place. And I think who's just improved massively. Someone's gone right up from the bottom to the top.
Oh, wait. I saw Daly hop up from P10 to P9, but I'm not sure who's... I think I'm with you. I'm not sure who's just jumped.
Yeah, I don't know who jumped, but someone there pushed a load of people down. Oh, it might have been Hacek, actually. Maybe they didn't push down as many as I thought, but someone there improved enough to make a slight difference in the leaderboard there. And well, that is the qualifying results underway. We'll cut back to them in a minute before the start of the race, but for now we're going to take a look at the championship standings after after race one, to see how that all turned out last week. So here are the GT4 Pro Class. You have Verstappen in the lead. They have 108 points. John O'Racer there in second place with 83. 20 points behind them, you have Borodai. William Stevenson, just 4 points behind Borodai, will be competing for that third place today. They're in fourth. Verstraeten is in fifth, followed by Kui and Schwenchik. They're in sixth and seventh, and all of them split up by minimal points. It's about 4 and 3 between them. Martin Lawrence as well, very close with 42 points. They're in eighth. Tom Watts has 25 points. They're in ninth, and Kalasiad has 0 points, but they will round out the top 10. And again, we've got some new drivers here today. Andy Borman, Jordan Daly, Gert Fischer and Samir Foch. They all join us for today's race after a mid-season sign-up. For the silver class for the GT4s, Martin Hajek will lead the group, but he's only 3 points ahead of Scott Brewer, who's in second. Grim Lilith in third place, also very close in the points too, so that battle will be very interesting. Goten's in fourth, followed by Schrum. They're in fifth currently. Carlisle's in sixth, followed by Olin. They're just 5 points behind. Darren Mulholland's in eighth. Vonja is in ninth, and Nistala will round out the top 10 for the silver. Mike Redford, Daniel Zombie, and Bart all will be in the points today. I believe Redford was here last week, but the other two will have joined in the mid-season sign-up.
Okay, so for the TCX, you got Harley Chamberlain in P1. 1 point behind, though, you got Marco Ripper in P2. P3, Benjamin Harmon, obviously our pole sitter for today. P4, P5, it's Andrew Verona and closely followed by Daniel Waldecker. Again, not just closely, but on equal points, you got Tom Byron in P6. P7, Christian Bock. P8 again very close behind, and another case of having two drivers on the same points. Jan Yeo and Alessio Ardito in P8 and P9, and P10 rounding off the top 10 is Raphael Hull with 33 points. In P11 we've got Reshinov with 0 points. Dom Healy, which I believe I think all of these might be new sign-ups as far as I have been told as well. So you got Dom Healy in P12, and in P13 you've got Eric Arnek. And in the AM class we've got Jenna Sommer with 93 points in P1. P2, Jamie Hunt with 92 points, just 1 point behind. Trailing by only just a few more points, Ian Marshall with 89, Sarah Stan in P4, and P5 will be Camille Juricek, and P6, Chebut Roskam.
Well, those are how the standings are looking after the first race, and as you can see, there is a lot of very close fighting in basically every single class and car right now. I mean, I don't think there's any of those championships that don't have a fairly close fight for one of those top spots. Going to be very exciting as we go into race 2. Well, here are how the cars will line up as we come into the first race of today. Fischer will be on pole for the GT4s, followed by Boardman and Schwenchik. They'll round out the top 3 for the Pro class. Goat will be the top in silver, Bart will be in second, and Hajek will round out the top 3. That is the silver class for the GT4s. For the M2 Cup cars, you'll have Heilmann on pole, followed by Waldecker, and then Bock will be in 3rd place. So, well, I mean, going into this race, Josh, I ask this to every person I commentate with, and we always, the first thing we do is we pick out who's looking good today and who we think is going to perform well. So I'm going to ask you that question. Who are you looking at today to perform well? They can be in either class, but just someone who you think is going to really stand out on track today.
Okay, I'm going to go with a bit of a slightly odd one here, but I can't ignore the time disparity for Azure. I mean, so far ahead in silver class, it's going to be interesting to see if they can kind of keep that pressure on for the entire 20 minutes for race 1 and see exactly where they wind up by the end of it. And then from there, I think it's anyone's game. You know, Hellman seems really, really strong in those TCX cars. Fischer seems really, really strong in the GT4s. But as you said before, Tim, these drivers, they're some of the best you can get. So all we could do is roll them off the start line and see what happens.
Yeah, well, we talked about how if you're in a different class to someone, you're not necessarily racing them for points, but like you're still allowed to race them, don't get me wrong, and we do encourage that you still race them, but right now, as you go up in 7th place, they don't have to really worry too much about Borodai and Daly and Verstraeten even behind them, because they're in a different class. So, like we said at the beginning, if you've got that buffer of people in a different class to you, you're very comfortable right now. And like you said, Goat has a very good start compared to Hajek, who is the next in line to really put the pressure on them. And like we were talking about as well, those are some big names. I mean, Borodai, Daly and Verstraeten as well. We've seen them in these GT4 fights before, and they're not drivers that you really count out of the race here. So Goat has a lot on their hands right now to stay into that 7th position, but I agree with you. I think they're in for a great race today.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget that qualifying result is on pace alone. So, you know, even with the disparity of classes, they were quicker than the likes of Borodai and Daly and Verstraeten. So, oh god, it's such a talk about this makes me want just to get everything started, and this straight is so long. the back of the field is still only halfway down the straight, as you can see on the mini map there.
I would like to imagine how it is for like the M2 cars right now. They turn onto the straight and the GT4s are just pulling away into the distance from the sheer speed alone. Well, those of you who join us every Thursday know that we like to look for Jesse Lee. Used to commentate here on a Thursday, but now likes to watch from the stands. Here is the man, the myth, the legend himself, Jesse Lee. As you can see, a little impressed with how qualifying went today. I think there's a slight smirk there in his stance, but they'll be watching from the stands today.
Jesse's a lot less dimensional than what I pictured him.
Jesse is certainly an interesting folk, but not how you would pitch him, no. Coming into the final corners now, we've talked about who we're looking for to perform today, and yeah, well, like you said, the start-finish straight, it's not the longest straight, but there's definitely a lot of potential there, and who I'm looking for is someone who can just really get their foot down early here and maybe go for a move into turn 1. I think that could be really beneficial, especially if you're Boardman right now and you can really slingshot yourself around turn 1. I think Boardman would be in for a good race.
Yeah, get the start right and try to pull up alongside Fischer going into T1, but the disadvantage of having the outside line could be what's the detriment to them, but I think we're about to begin.
Yeah, well, we're about to cross the line now. Fischer will be leading the group. We'll see just how good a start they get, and something that the M2s need to be wary about in particular is they need to be on that throttle as soon as possible, because if they're not, they're really going to struggle with the people near them. Well, we're off, and Fischer looks like they've got the best start they could wish for right now as they move to the right to cover off Boardman, but Boardman's going to try and break a little bit deeper into the corner, neck and neck. They're going to make a bit of contact, but not enough to throw either car off. If Boardman can hold the inside here, they'll be good for the rest of the corner, but unfortunately they're going to fall behind, holding up Schwenchik and Verstappen. Now Schwenchik, I believe, is going for a move around the outside, whereas Verstappen's going down the inside here, and Boardman is under a lot of pressure to keep these cars behind him going into turn 3 here. Going to be able to just stay ahead as Schwenchik and Verstappen make contact, but Boardman there, turn 1, looked to be overtaking Fischer, and then just fell back into the pack.
Yeah, I mean, Boardman, as you said, pulled up alongside, and I think they had a slight nudge, which cost Boardman a little bit of time, caused him to go defensive. And going defensive has just allowed Fischer just to run away relatively, a second ahead already in this first lap. cutting to a Razor on the straight now, side by side with the other 570. But I don't think Eraser's got too much place to go with the Porsche in head. But does have the advantage of the slipstream, but doesn't seem like it can work. Pulling out on the Cayman. I mean, this is a really high-speed corner coming up at the end of the straight. It's not a taking spot, but if it goes wrong, it goes very wrong. Going almost 3 wide through there with the two McLarens and the Porsche. Porsche just rubbing doors, I think, a little bit with the 570. That could have been very, very nasty. A little tap up the rear. Pushes the 699 wide. You see Daly, I believe, as well in front going wide. The McLarens touch. And I think that might be a Razor losing a few positions. And yeah, holy, wow.
Racer there looked to have a really good run into the corner. They were on the inside, like you said, they were almost 3 wide, and Racer did manage to come out ahead of both cars, but you saw they caught that outside curb, which threw them all the way across the track to the right again, and that just really threw off the 699 car, causing them to just completely lose grip, and then a slight nudge from the Porsche meant that they had to recover, and as you can see, I think they've lost about 4 or 5 positions in that skirmish alone. So Racer went for an overtake, didn't pay off, and now is going to have to climb back through the field. We're going to watch on board with Lilith here as they go to make a move into turn 1. Lilith and Watts, last time round, despite being in different splits to each other, absolutely battled it out in Barcelona, and it looks like we're in for the same again here between Lilith and Watts. It's a Porsche versus an Alpine, and well, I mean, Watts there held it through the corner, went for the outside, which meant that they had the inside for turn 2, and will just about stay ahead of the Porsche, although it looks like Lilith has got a really good run down the straight here and is looking again towards the inside, but a new challenger approaches as Martin Lawrence goes for a move round the outside of Lilith there. The BMW not quite being able to make it through, but we talked about it already. The BMW is going to be really good today. I think they're going to have a huge advantage once they get to the straights, and that's what Lilith's going to have to look out for here.
Oh yeah, I mean, another driver on the attack right now. It was Daly on Azure Goat as well. Pulled up right behind. I think Azure seems to have lost a few positions, but it seems to have cost them, but has put them right in the pack. You can see just in the camera screen there. But focusing on Hajek in the 735. 2 Caymans side by side at it on the straight. This could be down to setup and who has the better exit and slip. Going there is again 2 wide down into this quick left-hander. And it will seem that the Hajek's trying to go on the outside. Is this track limits maybe just ducking in just outside of the track limits, maybe picking up a bit of a warning there. But again, it's still side by side with I believe that's Verstraeten in the 67.
Well, we've seen this a lot now. I think this is the second time it's happened that we've seen it on screen. And I also noticed another car was in a similar position there. But Hajek went wide around that corner, and once you go wide, the curb, once you try and come back on track, it really throws you around. It's a very slippery curb to re-enter on, so you have to be careful. And as you saw there, Hajek went for a move, got the move done, but went too wide, and that then is what throws them back behind. We're going to have a race replay. Something's happened here between Arnek and another driver. It looks like they took the corner, turned in a little too tightly and slightly tapped on, but apparently that wasn't a replay we were supposed to see. There's supposed to be a much more action-packed one there, although still Arnek showing us that you have to be a lot more aware when there's a car on the inside. Oh, it looks like a bit of contact there is actually going to spin Jamie Hunt out, and they're now going to hit another car, which is going to send their... Oh, it's Jamie Hunt actually that got hit afterwards, but someone spun out there and hit Jamie, which caused both cars to struggle around the fast corner there, and a couple of incidents coming through, but for a race start at Paul Ricard, I was expecting a bit more chaos, so the fact that these guys have managed to keep it clean is amazing. Martin Lawrence there really rides the curb to fight their way through. Was that Verstraeten or was that Lilith? I think it was Verstraeten.
I think it was Verstraeten, yeah, the 67. It's so good on the curbs, the BMW. It's so good in the straight line. I mean, it's no surprise that Bordet is in P4, but I suppose if anything, if there is any surprise, I'd expect them to be a bit higher up just due to the choice of car, but it goes to show just how the level of some of the drivers out here. It goes to show that the car choice isn't everything. And speaking of cars in surprising positions, there's Porsche in P3 in the KTM, which I don't think any of us saw whilst we were leading up to this race.
I mean, if you told me a KTM would be in P3, I'd tell you you're lying. If you told me that Foch was driving it, I'd probably believe you. Samir Foch, of course, a very, very good driver, has managed to put the KTM up into P3, which, as you said, it's a cool order in Paul Ricard, but you've got some straights that the KTM really struggles on. Something I have just noticed, though, that has come across my eye line is Andy Boardman, who started here in P2 and looked to be going very well just before the first corner, currently sitting down in 10th place, so something has clearly happened to Boardman there, and they're going to have to try and climb back up through the field if they want to get back to where they originally started.
Oh yeah, they obviously seem to have the pace to do it, but having the pace and actually finding the time and space and room to get around the other cars, especially when they're defending, is an entirely different story. With only 13 minutes of the race remaining, I'd say only 13, we're not even halfway through race 1. But in relative terms, it's not that long of a race. These sprint races, you don't get an awful lot of time once you make a mistake to kind of come back, as we see Vondra just backing it out. Taking a look at the inside of Waldecker there in the final 2 corners. We said we were going to get close racing, and these cars are certainly delivering it.
Well, Vondra is a GT4 and Waldecker there's in the M2 Cup, so that's why Vondra is trying to clear them as quickly as possible, because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is just the M2, it doesn't have the acceleration. You don't want to be caught behind them coming out of the corner, and well, that's what happened to the 49 there. Vondra really trying to push their way through before they had to worry about it, because that final section with a lot of corners, one after the other, really not going to be useful if you're stuck behind an M2 going into it, because the places you can overtake, very, very limited. Well, here's currently Dom Healy. We've talked about them already. It's a returning veteran to the GT4 series. Actually, they're in the M2 and they're fighting off the GT4s right now, as it seems. But this is what happens, Joshua, is there's an accident at the start of the race. It puts some of the GT4s behind the M2s, and then obviously the GT4, they're going to get past eventually because they're that much faster. But to navigate through a bunch of cars that are so much slower than you, it's almost harder than navigating cars that go in the same speed. I'd argue that it's easier to lap a blue flag GT4 than it is to try and overtake an M2 car that is just going so much slower.
Oh yeah, especially if they're on the same lap as you. And technically, where you guys aren't in the same race, you're still kind of in the same race. So they have every right to defend you, as long as they're not weaving on the straight, and driving in a safe manner. They have every right to reasonably defend. I mean, it's their race too, after all. So it might not always be the smartest decision, because it can cost you time as well. But yeah, I fully agree with you on that one. As for Jurgot looking to have made a move on Stephen Quay, but then having to go defensive against Verstappen, and if there's ever a driver you do not want to go defensive against, or a driver to fear in a way, Verstappen's certainly one of them. So I don't envy Azur's position right now, looking like they've got the slipstream, pulling out, trying to outbrake into T1, having a little look on the inside, pulling up alongside. Stephen turning across a little bit, as you maybe a little far out, but valid move. Take a look on the inside. Stephen not happy at all, flash of the lights, and losing another position, and looking to maybe lose a position to who is in the McLaren? That's Pat Matthew in the McLaren as well.
Yeah, well, we said at the beginning, Go had this huge advantage in terms of there were 3 pro cars between them and Bart. Well, now Matcha has absolutely closed that gap up. There's currently, I think there's only 2 cars now after the little skirmish between Goat and Quay there. But as you were saying, Verstappen, not a driver you want to have behind you. Verstappen, of course, is the championship leader for the pro split right now, and this is quite a significant point gap there as well. As it looks like Schwenschik is having some issues out on the track here. Are they going slowly there? Is that them dropping through the field? Because they were second place, and now you can see they're down in 8th and dropping quite fast. So I'm wondering if they've either damaged the car, which I'd say is very hard to do here round Paul Ricard, or otherwise they've had some sort of mechanical issue. Maybe their pedals not working or something. But
Tim, look at the left-hand side of the car. There looks like damage on the side of the car there. So I'm wondering if something has happened. Look at the lower sill. It looks like there's just a little bit of paint that's kind of gone. It might be the sponsor from what I'm seeing. I know. It's like scratch me, scratch that. It's just the sponsor. It looked from my angle that I was looking at. It looked like there was some paint missing off the side. Almost like there'd been some side contact. But sorry for the interruption there. But talking about contact, that's Verstraeten. That's Verstraeten in the wall. That's the fast left-hander. It's the fast right-hander at the end of the main straight. So that's 2 cars that have come together. And we were saying before, it can be an overtaking spot if you're brave and both cars are compliant. But it seems to be that 2 cars have just come together. So that's as bad as it can be. Foch fighting with Boroday. Boroday looking to take the outside line. KTM, Boroday was running in P4 at last check, but I think with Svenchek dropping down the grid, that will have promoted a few drivers up as well. Oh, the BMW is so good on the curves, but then the KTM's so good in the corners, and there's this really tight corner coming up as well, and that might give Bosch a chance just to kind of look up the inside, but that brings Azure into the mix, who's actually going defensive against Verstappen. So they have these 4 cars that are all bunched up, and this straight might be the thing that equalises them all out.
Why was the KTM there going round the side of the BMW on the straight? I don't understand how Bosch managed to pull that off there. But they were going for a move round the outside of Borodai after a short straight. But now, as you said, Borodai's got a real advantage here. He's in the fastest car for the GT4s with a massive top speed. But Borodai, you can just see, pulling away easy on the straight. They're pulling Goat through us. I think Goat's about to be on the overall podium, because they've just cleared the KTM as well. And we're watching from Verstappen as they look like they're probably about to slingshot their way around the KTM as they come into the final corner. And we've said you've got to be careful here, because both cars have to be compliant and both cars have to be ready. I mean, we've seen if you go slightly too wide, the curb's going to speed you back out. Someone's gone wide! It was Borodai going wide, and like you just said, the curb spat them back onto the track. They've made contact with Goat, and that will be a very, very big deficit for Goat there, as they just went smashing into the wall. We're going to have a race replay to see exactly what happened. You can see Borodai rejoins the track, but it really throws them back across, and Goat there basically gets... They hit the wall, and then they're almost back on the track just from the sheer force of how they hit the wall there. So not an ideal end to the race for Goat. I mean, Goat, they got up onto the overall podium, and they were looking to have a really strong race there, so they're definitely not going to be happy with how that turned out. But going back to what we were saying, that corner is very, very dangerous, because if you go wide, as we just saw, the curb, basically, it just throws you back into whatever's there. And if there's someone else there, you're going to take them out like we just saw.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like, looked at the BMW, it looked like Borodai went wide and tried just to come back onto the line. Obviously, you know, you can hang it really, really wide at that particular corner exit. So as long as you don't go over the little markers further up on the road, it is still counted within track limits from what I remember, what I believe on this track. So yeah, you can make the absolute most of that exit through that fast corner, but you have to rejoin the track again at some point, and if there's another car maybe looking at making a move or hasn't quite made its stick, or just hanging around, you know, on the track on the corner exit, sadly that is a real potential for that kind of incident to happen, as we've just seen. And no, it's unfortunate. But yeah, it requires both cars to have the spatial awareness, and you know, if you're the car behind, make your intentions known early, and hope the guy in front or the guy side by side is aware of the situation as well, and could avoid that.
It's like what Kevin Boss has just said in the chat. You know, it was a bad rejoin from Borodai. They came back onto the track where there was another car there, but to defend Borodai a little bit there, that curb, it's not just, you don't just cross the curb like you would if you were just going across the track here. Once you touch that curb, it's got a slight bit less grip, and it doesn't really throw you back on. So Borodai probably trying to do a subtle rejoin there. Did get thrown back onto the track, as Borodai actually just picks up a drive-through for track limits. So did Svenchik as well. You saw someone in chat, Rybeck, he was asking, wonder what happened to Svenchik. Well, we don't actually know. We never worked it out, but they're down in 12th and have just picked up a drive-through. So that is not going to help their race at all as they try to recover here. Currently, Martin Lawrence trying to hold off Boardman, who we saw have a couple of instances earlier on. I believe they're fighting Daly neck and neck right now as Boardman's waiting for a way through, and Daly and Lawrence make contact here. Daly just about managing to recover, but that's going to open the door for Boardman to sneak down the inside. Now a racer's trying to come through as well. So again, it's another situation here, Joshua, of close racing with people lurking just behind. And if you go a bit wide, if you get tapped slightly, you're losing 2 or 3 positions.
Oh yeah, I mean, as good racing as we've seen, you know, obviously we are seeing some, dare we say, slightly sloppy moments as well, and obviously didn't cost Daly too much, a couple of track positions, but kept it out of the wall, which is always, like, you know, the next best thing. And making a move on the outside of the 699 on a Razor, just squeeze, just hustling it through, just hustling it through, you know, just getting on with it. But
BMW. They're so on the curbs. It's like Daly just went on the curbs there and goes, what's a curb? As they just sneak their way around a racer there. But it's just, yeah, like you're saying, the BMW, when it comes to curbs and straight lines, is something else the car.
Yeah, I mean, I think its ground clearance and how wallowy it can be is kind of its downfall. It's not the most agile car on the grid. I mean, especially compared to something like the KTM or even the Alpine. But yeah, as an all-round car, as a kind of jack of all trades, master of none, it's such a good option. I mean, I can't think of too much bad to say about the M4.
Well, speaking of the KTM, Foch here really just trying to fight to stay in the position they're in. Verstappen has retaken the position. Borja goes wide yet again here, trying to hold off Verstappen. I think that's going to be Verstappen maybe coming through. Borja has to go into the pits anyway for their drive-through penalty, but Foch, you can just see they get to that really long straight and they get swallowed by the cars behind. Bart here in the McLaren, they're probably just going to wait until the next straight where they can absolutely eat that KTM right up because it struggles, and we've seen it. Verstappen, but back to the corner where the incident happened between Borodai and I can't remember who it was now. Goat, yeah, Borodai and Goat made contact with each other, but basically 3 cars had slingshotted their way past the KTM on the straight. And then it wasn't until the incident where Foch actually managed to climb back up past Verstappen again. But it's not a good feeling, is it? You get onto the straight, you've put your foot down, you've nailed the corner section, and then 3 cars are passing you just simply because you don't have the acceleration or the speed to keep up.
I mean, that's one way to look at it. But then, because I believe Foch is a new sign-up for the series, from what I remember looking at the standings.
They're here for this race, yeah.
Maybe by looking at what tracks are coming up and maybe taking the hit at Paul Ricard, going, okay, well, the rest of the tracks are kind of like really tight and twisty, and maybe the KTM is really strong there, and then just take the compromise here at Paul Ricard. But even as a compromise, I mean, look at P3 overall right now, and you can't really argue with that.
I mean, yeah, P3 is definitely the place that Foch wants to be right now, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned maybe they're looking at the rest of the championship. I'd say maybe they were Silverstone later on in Nürburgring. Possibly the KTM could be quite good there. Someone's going for an overtake here. I believe that is Kui and on Foch and Lawrence right now. Oh no, Foch is ahead. It's Kui and Lawrence and Boardman in the background, but Kui here trying to go around the outside of... No, I think there's Lawrence trying to go around the outside of Kui there, and Boardman again just waiting, lurking just behind to try and take their position. And here's where we're going to see them strike back, coming round the corner. It looks like Lawrence might have gone wide, and now Boardman's just squeezing their way through. So Boardman now clearing the 171 BMW, turns their attention to the number 26 Chevrolet ahead, and well, that's been Boardman's race so far. I mean, they started second, they fell all the way down to 10th, and they've spent the rest of the time lurking until the door opens itself as Lawrence there, missing their braking point, almost ended the race for Boardman on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, you was just saying there, P2 down to P10 or around P10, and coming back. With less than a minute of the race left to go, second to last lap, that's not what Boardman would have wanted. And it's good to see Lawrence, just kind of taking the wide line. This will be the last lap of the race, as we see Boardman trying to take the outside into T1, the inside into T2, though, which quickly turns into Boardman going slightly wide, putting them under pressure from Martin Lawrence in the 171 there. But again, slipping back into position, and Lawrence is going to have to try to find another way around. Still a bit of a gap between the cars, and neither is really safe. I mean, Boardman playing it really safe in the last lap, really proving that you can have a scrap going into that fast corner at the end of the straight. As long as you're respectful of the cars around, you just hang back, wait for the car in front and see if they make a mistake, capitalise on it, and that's exactly what Boardman did in that little section on the last lap there, so making up that position. But will be desperately trying to find a way around the 26 Chevrolet. As we see Lawrence, straight line speed on that BMW. I keep gushing about it. This whole race I've been gushing over the BMW just a little bit. But I feel like it is a really strong car. It's a really good option. And here we are, just seeing Lawrence just driving past Boardman pretty much as we look on the front splitter and tucking in behind the Chevrolet. So having passed Boardman completely, maybe with a few corners to go, maybe has a chance at P5 here.
Yeah, Lawrence just clearing Boardman easy on the straight, and like you said, we're gushing over it, but it's because the BMW is just that fast in a straight line. Coming into the final few corners now are Lawrence, Kui and Boardman still battling out. Kui's giving himself a little bit of a gap to the two behind, and the battling between the number 69 and the 171 here has caused Kui to slightly pull away. But here comes Fischer, about to cross the line, has led from lap 1, start to finish. Gert Fischer will cross the line and be the winner of race 1 here today. Verstappen's going to cross the line in 2nd place, followed by Bart. They will be 3rd overall, 1st place in their split. Well, here is the fight that we're currently watching as Lawrence attempts to make the final overtake on Kui down the straight. Not going to be able to clear the Chevrolet, and that will be Kui in 5th, Lawrence in 6th, and Boardman has fallen back down to 7th after a penultimate lap overtake. But you can see the rest of the cars now filtering across the line. A couple of battles still going on down to the start-finish line. And, well, you can see now Bock is fighting for the P2 position against Dom Healy, someone who we've mentioned is a returning veteran to the Thursday series. And now Dom Healy's donning the M2 car as they try and hold off Bock behind. Bock, someone who was very strong last week at Barcelona, and looks like they might be able to try and find something here. They've got a couple more corners to do so, but they are going to have to close that gap a lot more because that BMW is not going to do the accelerating for them. So going into this final corner, they need to try and make a move, and actually I think Dom is probably clear now as Bock goes for an absolute send for the inside there, try and slow down the number 40 out of the corner, and maybe they'll have enough slipstream to cover. Knowing these cars, I doubt it's going to be enough because the slipstream really does not matter for these guys. But Bock there with a final attempt at an overtake gave us something to talk about across the line. I mean, what a set. I thought they were going to like full on go for the inside there and absolutely send it down the inside of Healy.
Yeah, it certainly looked that way, but as you say, just managed to keep it out of the back of the car to finish the race. And I mean, I know you've got some of the stragglers just coming over now. I mean, the number 19 of Eric Arnack coming over the line now in P29. Not sure where that puts them in class. It's looking like that'd be, yeah, it's last in the split, but. You know, it's been a tough race for some of the drivers out there for race 1, so there's always race 2, you know, there's always
race 2, and race 2 is double points as well. It's double the length, it's a 40-minute long race, so a lot of different factors come into play, and some of the cars that maybe didn't perform quite as well across the sprint might start to perform a little bit better in terms of the tyre wear on them. But going into race 2, it's 40 minutes, it's worth double the points, so without saying one race is more important than the other, race 2 is more important than race 1 here, really. You want to get the better result in race 2 because that's where you're drawing in the most points. But like you said, some drivers had a really rough time in that race there. Boardman, Svenschik and Goat as well, just not getting the performance they really wanted. Well, actually, arguably, they got the performance they wanted out of the car, but just got caught up in some unfortunate circumstances. One thing I want to cover right now, whilst we're in the gap between race 1 and 2, is something that's been talked about in chat. Santos mentioned that track limits is what would have caused the penalties for the drive-through. That they are correct. We don't have live stewarding here on a Thursday. The reason for that is that most of our stewards are driving in the race so far, so this is more of a race where staff can get involved in, but because of that, we don't have live stewarding. Any penalties you see coming up on the screen are given by the game itself. So the people with a drive-through penalty, that will be for cutting the track 4 times. They'll have 3 warnings, and the 4th time they'll get a drive-through. Somewhere there, I believe it was Martin Hajek, Joshua, at the end, had a 30-second stop and go. So I'm wondering if maybe they went into the pits for a drive-through at some point and then sped out, because I'm pretty sure that's the only way you can get a stop and go. I guess unless you cut the track 5 times maybe, but I'm not sure how you get a stop and go without being in the pit lane.
When you get a drive-through, do you only have like 3 laps to serve that drive-through? Because that might be that maybe they've just pushed it a bit too far, or I'm not certain, but it might be a case of speeding in the pits. I mean, it's quite a common thing to see. I mean, we see that a lot around these parts, but you know, it could be either way.
Yeah, without a mandatory pit stop as well, I can't think any other reason they'd be near the pit lane and enough to get a 30-second. I'm also wondering as well, actually, similar to what you were saying, is about the drive-through. You have 3 laps to serve it, but of course, if you don't serve it before the end of the race, does that then turn into 30 seconds just plus on your time anyway? I'm wondering if that's maybe what happens, that Hajek got a drive-through, maybe on the last lap, couldn't serve it, and now has wound up getting the 30 seconds. But either way, not going to be a good result for Hajek now, who was someone who was pushing. I think they started in 2nd place in their class. They were still on that podium coming into the final few corners, and that 30 seconds is going to put them back down in the field, because obviously that all applies post-race, and I think that's something that I wasn't expecting to see today, but we've definitely seen a lot of it. There's been a lot of penalties and warnings for track limits. I didn't think we'd get a lot of that here at France, honestly.
I think Paul Ricard's one of those tracks where, especially on the exit, like going onto the main straight on the fast left, just out of it as well.
Oh yeah, of
T1,
course.
T2, you could really kind of hang the car quite wide, but it's very easy to start taking that for granted, to start taking liberties with it too. So, I mean, on one hand, there's a million miles of run off him. You can see it here on the helicam that's very kindly been provided by Christian. So look at how long that straight is. It's almost as long as the runway that goes alongside it.
It doesn't even fit on the camera. Even in landscape mode, you can't see the whole straight. It is simply that long. But yeah, as you say, it definitely puts a massive factor into the race as well. I mean, you've got a couple of tracks in this season, honestly, where they've got these long straights, and I'm surprised we only have 2 BMW GT4s on the track right now, because I honestly thought the BMW would be the favourite pick going into this season, because we're here at Paul Ricard this week, where the BMW, let's be real, is very unchallenged in the straight. You can absolutely just push yourself through the field, and it's very easy to overtake with. But next week, round 3, we're off to Monza, which is a very similar situation. You got 3 long straights there where you can really push the BMW to the limit. And again, I think we're going to just see a repeat of Paul Ricard, where the 2 BMW cars, we're going to get them onto the straights, and they'll just be clearing 2, even 3 drivers at a time. And it's not until really you get to Nürburgring where the BMW starts to perform less, because even Silverstone's a lot more of a varied track, but there's still those long straights. So I'd have thought personally the BMW would have been the favoured pick into this season. However, that was not the case, and I'm going to say, you can probably hear it in my voice, I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, well, as I say, I think the BMW overall, I mean, on the straights, it's not straight to the curbs, it's astronomical, but overall, it's a fairly kind of solid car. I wouldn't say it's in terms of total overall pace, I don't think that it is the strongest by any means, but it's far from the weakest. It's kind of like let's take a solid mid tier. But that's from my experience. I mean, and different drivers might think differently. Different types of cars suit different people. The Porsche has always been incredibly quick. You know, the Aston GT4 is, as proven in the last race, ridiculously quick as well. So, and even the KTM, on a track where it should have a huge disadvantage, is kind of proving it's wrong on some things. So, who knows?
Speaking of the Porsche, Grim Lilith last race got a podium finish, I believe, alongside, I think Bart was the winner of the Silver GT4, and I think it was Carlisle and Lilith on the rest of the podium. Something you did forget to mention there, but certainly wasn't overlooked. It was just a very hectic race up the front, but they're people who I think we should probably watch a little bit more coming into the second race, because honestly, those Silver GT4s, they were really fighting out, and especially with a lot of the pros as well. Now, of course, they're allowed to. It doesn't mean anything in terms of points. If you beat a pro and you're a silver, like, it's not going to get you any more points or anything. But like you were saying at the beginning, you know, it's good for the ego, and it does help you to think, okay, maybe I'm progressing into that part where I'm beginning to become a pro in terms of the speed. I've got the speed to compete with the rest of them. And certainly today, I think one thing we've seen a lot of is these silver cars in the class. They've just been amazing. Like, Goat was on the podium at one point. Bart finished on the overall podium as well. And I think today they are some of the drivers who have stood out. Like you said, Azure Goat was one to look at, and they today in race 1, whilst they were still in it before they got hit by Borodai, they were definitely the driver that I'd say was performing the best and above their usual sort of performance area, you know?
Yeah, no, I fully get you. And let's not forget though, there are other factors as well. There's the car choice, and there's even the track as well. Some drivers, and this is a very, very polarizing track, as we know. So maybe it could just be the drivers like Azure, maybe like dare I say, like Paul Ricard? Is anyone allowed to like Paul? I'm bringing my own personal bias into this.
You don't have to be biased, it's fine.
But yeah, are we even allowed to like Paul Ricard here at RCI? Let's be real. Because it's in the game, it doesn't feel fair to just not throw it on every now and again. Or maybe someone just likes to see our drivers suffer. It's a mixture of things. But maybe, these drivers like Azure, they like this track. They've always been, and I know Azure from other leagues as well, and this is a track they do have a fair bit of pace on. So, yeah, maybe that comes into play as well, and it's really interesting, and it really goes to show just kind of how close this racing can be.
Yeah, I think it's like you say, some tracks just suit different drivers better. Some people, they come on and, I mean, like you said, Paul Ricard is not a track that usually people will say is their favourite, but hey, maybe Fisher here thinks that Paul Ricard is the absolute best track on the planet and it's their best track overall. So there's different drivers that perform to different strengths on the track, and it's something we see a lot across the season as well, is that occasionally different drivers who maybe were more mid-pack in race 1 and 2, they'll start to show up around race 3 when the tracks benefit them a lot. And it's an interesting factor to count in, is how the driver in particular performs on the track. Kevin Boss in the chat said they might have missed it, is the grid for race 2 set by quali or race 1 results. The grid for both races is set by the quali results here, so Fisher, Boardman and Verstappen will be your top 3 again going into race 2. So that's why quali, we talk about it, it's so important because it does determine the grid for both races. If you have a bad quali, you're starting from the back both times. But, well, we're coming into race 2 now, 40 minutes. Joshua Devonshire, take us away.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Boardman getting the start as well, but not quite as strong of a start. Stephen Key coming up behind, going right behind Boardman there. A great start, looking on the outside of the Aston. Not quite able to make anything of it. Boardman not having to go quite as defensive as before, but not in the position to really make up a move onto Fisher, but actually being overtaken by Verstappen as well as the cutback, going through the cutback there. So Boardman dropping down a few positions. Stephen Key taking a look on the outside there as well, and if provided that Key can stay close, again, we've seen what that straight can do, but as I say that, you've got the KTM of Forsch coming through as well, not quite able to make anything of it. It looked like for a brief moment that the Camaro did run a bit wide, but has kept it on the track, trying to get the exit to maybe take a look at Boardman in the Porsche.
Boardman really not having good starts in either of these races here. Race 1 obviously had a little bit of tap that sent them back, and then race 2 Verstappen just overtook them coming around the exit of turn 2, and that threw Boardman back into the fight yet again. We see now Borodai showcasing the speed of the BMW compared to the speed of the KTM on the straight, and Borodai has already cleared Foch in the time it took me to even begin to say that sentence. So Borodai here just showcasing the speed of the BMW. It looks like they're probably about to start putting pressure on Kui. By the time we get to the end of the straight as well, you can see the gap there is non-existent, and Kui, who's currently following behind Boardman, is now in the reins of Borodai as well. Bart has just cleared Daly by the look of it, although Daly's going to strike back down the inside here into the long sweeping right-hander, and it's a similar start, honestly, to what we saw race 1 for a lot of these drivers, is that Boardman struggled a bit at the start, and then everyone else, like, the battle really starts to happen in that fast right-hander. I'd say that's probably, at the end of the straight, that's where we've seen the most overtakes attempted today.
Oh yeah, it's such a... It is such a valid spot to go for one, but as we say, we've also seen what happens when it goes wrong. There was a car off on the gravel there a few frames ago. I'm not entirely certain who that was. It looked like it was one of the Porsches.
I believe it was Verstappen, maybe? Yeah, you can see Verstappen's falling down through the order now, but yeah, like you said, Verstappen went a bit wide, and that's like you were saying about the corner in general. You know, you can see what happens when it goes wrong, and that is what happens when it goes wrong. If you go a little bit wide, it can be quite hard to recover. Somebody's gone flying across the track there. I think that was a cone. There's Healy and Bok already fighting it out at the start of race 2 after finishing race 1 so close together. Right back at it. They're not wasting any time here at race 2.
Moment of silence for Cone Friend as Dom Healy. Dom Healy asserting a little bit of dominance there onto Bok, going onto the inside, late on the brakes, switching to the outside, going back to the inside again. The way this track sort of flows, you could really just kind of go for a move on the outside of one corner, and before you know it, you've got the inside to the next. It's got a very particular flow, this track. I know it was originally designed as a test track of all things, So it's surprising that it yields such good racing from a watching perspective, or from a spectator's perspective. Obviously, Verstappen getting the run onto Fischer. The first time Fischer's really been challenged in any of these races, going for a move, and this is and this is what we mean. Both cars being very aware of each other's presence, able to kind of give the space. Fischer giving up the position now, but with every opportunity to take it back, and taking it back is what they're looking to do on the inside of the next corner. Very sort of it's a sneaky corner, that one. It feels shorter than it really is. It's such a long corner. You have to be so patient onto the exit there, and Fischer just getting squeezed out wide. Fischer just getting squeezed out wide by Verstappen taking the lead of this race.
Is this season 4? Because I can swear I'm having flashbacks right now. Verstappen and Fischer battling it out for first place. Both of these drivers are absolutely, they take it to the limit with each other's. Fischer here looks like they're going to try and get Verstappen back on the straight, both in Aston Martin, so there's going to be no advantage in the cars themselves, but Fischer here has the slipstream. You can see them now looking towards the inside of turn 1, going to try and brake a little bit deeper than Verstappen, and they do. They manage to get neck and neck into the corner. Verstappen still on the inside though for turn 2. They're going to push Fischer as wide as possible, but Fischer getting a much better run out of turn 2 here. He's going to remain neck and neck with the number 747, but Verstappen still on the inside, going to have a huge advantage into the next set of corners. They're almost making contact, none for either car to get thrown off course, and that is Fischer retaking first place from Verstappen. These two at the front. This is what we have been waiting to see this entire time. Fischer and Verstappen back at it, battling for P1.
Oh yeah, I mean, longer race, which means you can take a few liberties early on in the race. We're getting a race replay. Tom Bryant coming down the main straight here. Yeah, spinning wide just on the corner. Other cars having to take evasive action. That's not a corner you want to. That's not a corner you want to stay packed on the exit. But what do? You can't reverse, because then that might be unpredictable to the cars trying to go around you. You can't go forward. All you have to do is sit and wait for a gap. As we see Verstappen and Fischer side by side yet again on that same corner we just saw that replay on, and same corner that keeps coming up. Fischer still on the inside, Verstappen on the outside. Boardman taking a look down the middle, and you've got 5 cars, another 2 cars behind. You've got Borodai and Key also looking to capitalise on this. Boardman capitalising, going on the inside of Verstappen. Verstappen on the inside of the next corner. This is the switchback we were just talking about. And it seems that, yes, just keeping a tight line, great defensive, blocking Boardman and trying to hunt down Fischer again. Fischer trying to make the most of the gap, trying to increase the gap to prolong the time it's going to take for Verstappen to take another look. But right now, Fischer is holding on to the lead for this race, but for how long?
Well, Fischer can breathe for probably about half a second here, because that is the amount of time Verstappen will waste trying to fend Boardman back off. But Verstappen now has a nice big gap to Boardman that will be able to help them to close back down on Fischer. Boardman now having to fight off Borodai and Queen. We know how fast the BMW is in the straight, but they're currently pressured from the number 26 Chevrolet behind them, and that alone is going to be enough to help Boardman stay ahead of that BMW. But Borodai here, you can see they really want to be in this fight. They've already taken Kui because they were in 5th. They're trying to climb, and they have the car and the speed to do so, but because Kui is still lurking, still neck and neck with them, it's just slowing that BMW right back down, almost humbling the car and saying, okay, you might be fast in a straight line, but in the corners, I'm going to start to fight you again, because just by being here, that is going to start to put pressure on the car. And you can see now Borodai has fallen back into 5th place with Kui, despite not having the advantage. I mean, the Chevrolet by no means is better in the corners than the BMW, but it is enough for Kui to just really showcase what they can do and put Borodai back into 5th here. But there's so much close racing happening right now. Martin Lawrence is trying to overtake a race, so they're going to show us what the BMW can do in a straight line. A race in the McLaren, certainly not a slouch with top speed, but it's got nothing on the BMW here. You can see Lawrence really just pulling through, getting neck and neck with a race, although I'm not sure it's going to be enough by the time they get to the corner. Ideally here, Lawrence wants to be clear of a racer by the time they get to the corner, but they're not going to be, as a racer continues to hold that inside line, and that might be enough for the McLaren to just put it through ahead here. But we've seen it now a couple of times, a couple of laps in a row, is if you go neck and neck into this corner, you've just got to be that much more daring. You've got to have your foot on the accelerator as early as you can. You've got to be really daring with that brake, because whoever pushes the car the most is going to come out on top by the end of the set of corners.
Oh yeah, I mean, and And again, it's a case of just trying to get that line as well, try to take a later apex to get the better exit, and then maybe take a look into the next sequence of corners. Well, as we see Dom Healy again making the move on the inside of, I believe that this is the long corner. Yeah, this is what I mean by in Chamberlain's position here, just being able to just sort of position the car into a spot where, even if you're overtaken, you can try to get the better line into the next corner and just try to make the overtaking car take a compromised line of the previous corner and just try to get that run through. And that hasn't really worked for Chamberlain here. Obviously, Healy has gotten through and seems comfortably ahead too. So maybe this is the Healy that we were told about before the start of this race. Really kind of planned move, really textbook move. You very sort of well thought out, and that's the kind of racing you really want to see with this sort of thing. And look at the gap already. Chamberlain having to go defensive to, I believe that's Waldecker. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, so Chamberlain having to go defensive to try and defend that position, which gives Healy just that chance just to pull away, and that's exactly what Healy will be wanting.
Yeah, Healy there's just, they've managed to get the overtake done. They're putting a bit of distance as well on Chamberlain, and that's the thing with the M2 cars is because they really struggle with that acceleration, because you have to keep a lot of momentum. The second, as you were saying, the second you start to put pressure on the person ahead, I mean, that's always the tactic in racing, is to put pressure on the car ahead, but the second you do it with the M2s, you can really ruin the momentum, and it just takes the M2 so long to get back up to speed that, as you saw there, Chamberlain, after fighting Healy, wasn't ready to take on Waldecker either, and that means that Waldecker and Chamberlain are going to be batting out with each other now, and that's going to give Healy a chance to pull away. But I mean, Joshua, you'll remember, unfortunately we didn't get it on stream, but Jesse Lee sat in this box before we even came live today and said Dom Healy is the person to look at today. They're a returning racer, used to race with us a long time ago, and now they've returned, and that they are showcasing exactly what they can do. And what they're known for really is that, I'd say Healy last race was in second place, this race they're in second place again, and I've got to say, in terms of people that we've been watching today, Healy has definitely been putting in some of the best performances we've seen.
Oh yeah, in terms of racecraft, it's been absolutely genius. As I was saying about those planned out moves, not just spur the moment ones where you've kind of got you got an advantage. I'll just overtake this car on the straight. With these M2s, that's not really a thing. And a lot of the overtakes we've seen, especially from Healy, have been those kind of calculated, really smooth textbook ones. And that's what really separates someone between. You can be a quick driver and quick in qualifying, but with a race at 40 minutes, the 20-minute race in race one as well, it doesn't really mean anything if you can't translate that pace to working with cars around you. So, Healy showing a prime example of maybe not qualifying the best, but in terms of pure racecraft, being able to stick it with the best of them even still. So, next port of call for Healy is catching up with Hellman. Hellman is up the road, and well, it's not impossible. It's not an impossible task with 28 minutes remaining.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we've actually, I think this is the first time ever in a championship with M2 Cup Cars Racing, this is the first time we have not spent the first hour talking about the tyres alone. We did mention them, but we haven't been exclusively talking about them like we usually do, and that's something that is going to come into play in this race. We talked about it slightly at the beginning here, is that if you have abused your tyres too much early on in those M2 cars, you're going to struggle a lot later because they fall off around that 30-minute mark. And Jesse Lee, a famous man, once said to me that if you abuse those tyres too much on the first 3 laps, you will be driving on terrible tyres for the rest of the race, because there's no way you can recover them. You can't magically fix them. You can't magically get them back up to performance. You can't slow down, ease off a bit, try and build the tyre back into a momentum and a good performance. You're stuck with the tyre set you've got, unfortunately, and they will really drag you down. So as you were saying, Joshua, you've got 28 minutes left in this race, so not only have you got enough time to make some overtakes happen, but things are going to start to switch up in the next 15 minutes or so. People's tyres are going to start dropping off, and we're going to see a massive degrade in performance across these M2 cars.
Oh, sorry, I am listening, Tim. Also, just looking at this battle between Chamberlain and Waldecker. I'll get back to that thought in just a moment. But yeah, Chamberlain just about keeping ahead. A little bit of contact there. That's opened up the door for box 2. not quite able to make anything from it. It will sort of pace the cars out a little bit, but we'll have to see what happens in the next coming corners. It will maybe give Waldock another chance. But no, back to the thought on the tyres. Yes, with longer race, I mean, look at some of the situations going on right now. Haleman and Healy, obviously Healy tracking down Haleman. Haleman, no doubt at this point, pushing to keep that car going for as long as they might be. And that might give Healy that chance later on in the race to maybe look at making a move. But if you're in Healy's position right now, what do you do? Do you try to push as hard as you can to try and keep up and scrub the front? Or do you hang back, hope Haleman has scrubbed his already, and then make a move later on in the race? That's all valid options, as we're seeing Sommer looking at taking a look at the inside of Marshall there. But far back for it, not quite there, but not there. But again, back to the race for the lead. Boardman, Verstappen, Fischer, in ascending order, still neck and neck pretty much almost halfway through this race. Verstappen having gotten by Fischer earlier on in the race, Boardman still in the mix. Creed dropping back a little bit, but not too far back, will capitalise if any of these three make a mistake and take either themselves or each other out. And, I mean, yes, I think it's only a matter of time until we start seeing them really try to sort of like just take another scrap.
Yeah, they've definitely been giving us the entertainment value of this race, has the front three here, because they've been basically continuously fighting since about lap 3, lap 4. Verstappen and Fischer started up their fight. That brought Boardman back into it, and as you can see now, Boardman is very much still in contention for the lead of this race if they can clear both Verstappen and Fischer, so we'll see how that turns out. In the chat, Wolf Motorsport said this is some great close racing. We agree, Wolf Motorsport, this is some great close racing, and also earlier on, this is one for you, Christian. Wolf Motorsport said, I love the camera work. We love the camera work too. Christian Stricker, our broadcaster, has been broadcast on Thursdays now for I think the last 5-6 seasons. Always does a stunning job and provides us with the action we're receiving right now as Boardman getting all over the tail of Verstappen here, trying to find a way through, but Verstappen continuing to hold strong. He's not showing any chances of braking and still keeping the gap close to Fischer ahead.
Yeah, Fischer not getting a moment to relax, really. We've seen Verstappen really sort of pull up on the straight, but it looks like Fischer is getting an opportunity to pull ahead a little bit, and Boardman getting the slipstream. This isn't the acceleration on the Porsche is great, and maybe a little bit of a tap there to the 747. Just trying to get the slip, and maybe at this point in time, maybe there's some sort of strategy going on for these two to even maybe help each other along, give each other a tow, and try to almost team up in a way onto Fischer. There's long enough of the race left that you're maybe not fighting so close for the end, but just want to try and solidify the track position in the first place. And if you're working with the car ahead of you, giving each other that little bit of overspeed to try and catch up to P1, that again is maybe an option. As we see a Razor running wide, Daly going on the inside, the Alpine and the Porsche following in the background there, and a Razor going very hot, getting a slide on the outside and running onto the marbles there, which is that again in terms of tire life, that's not going to do you any help, Razor. You don't want to do that, and just tucking in and just trying to make another run of it.
Yeah, Razor there went for a drift, and as he said, that would not have helped the tyres. Just going back to Boardman and Verstappen and Fischer, and that particular straight in mind here is that I'm wondering if a slight tactical side from Boardman, actually, hang on a second, it looks like the 77 is going to go for a move here on Sommer ahead. We're going to watch from the rear of Sommer as they try and make this defence happen, but straight line in the 77 will have the slipstream. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. These M2 cars, they don't really benefit as much from the slipstream as the other cars do, but you can see that Jurasek, they're really trying here to get themselves neck and neck, but it's just not happening, and Sommer going to be able to hold on to it for now. But going back, I'm wondering if Boardman there stayed behind tactically, because look at it this way. If you're Boardman, you're sitting in third place right now, about a tenth of a second off the two leading cars behind you, not behind you, in front of you. What you're hoping for is just to follow them until the end stage of the race and then try and slingshot past. You don't need to do any moves just yet, although speaking of moves, it looks like Jurasek has got the move around the outside of Sommer here. Sommer here, not finding the momentum, is now going to get swallowed up by Tom Bryant, who's just started to begin to lurk in the background here, but Sommer losing out to the number 77 is now falling behind under pressure from the number 42. Well, we're back with the lead battle as Verstappen makes that gap very, very close between them and Fischer. All three of them running as wide as possible there. Probably picking up a warning for track limits coming out of that corner, but you can see all so close together. And yeah, Josh, back to what I was saying, sorry, is that Boardman, if you're Boardman right now, I'd say just stay where you are for the next 15 minutes. You really don't need to be chewing up your tyres or putting yourself in a position where you have to worry about defending. Just follow at your own leisurely pace. You know you've got the pace to stay with them. So just hold off. Keep your tyres in good condition.
That is a very valid point for a lot of reasons, actually, when you think about it. First of all, it's tyre saving, as you've just mentioned there. Secondly, it's a case of if you overtake them at this point in time, you're then put under the pressure of trying to pull away without having the slipstream. Where if you just kind of, for a full 20 minutes, that is stressful, frankly. So maybe just waiting for the very last laps to maybe take a look. It's a bit of a gamble in a way in case you can't. I think that might just blow this theory out the water, considering that Boardman just taking no prisoners there going into T1, just squeezing by on the inside. It almost looked like Verstappen just missed the apex a little bit there from the angle we just saw it through, and Boardman taking full advantage. But again, it's just being able to tuck behind Fischer and giving it another look. Or maybe that was. Maybe that's Verstappen having us in the background and realising that maybe they're onto a trick there and falling back and letting Boardman through.
I mean, maybe. I think the thing is, it's like you said, Verstappen went a little bit wide going into the corner, and that's the other thing that Boardman is probably benefiting from here by just lurking in the background. Obviously, people make mistakes, drivers make mistakes from time to time. This is just simply what happens. So Boardman here taking full opportunity. Verstappen maybe messes up turn one there, goes a little bit wide compared to what they usually do, and that's Boardman's chance to strike. And now we're going to see Boardman up into that second place. It's their turn to put the pressure on Fischer in the chat. Kepri Atom said pulled over because my ping was spiking. Well, that's unfortunate, but thank you very much for pulling over there and not putting danger on other drivers. And I'm sure you had an amazing race. I hope you did have an amazing race when you're on the track as well. As Bart and Lawrence here scrapping out Daly, looking for the inside. I think actually no, this is Goat, not Daly. Goat, Bart and Lawrence all scrapping out. This is Goat versus Bart for the first place in silver right now, and Lawrence just getting caught up in the fight. But it looks like, I think that is Goat leading, and I believe Lawrence just planted themselves in between Bart and Goat as well. So that's going to turn out how that battle is for now. And Goat just had a phenomenal couple of races. Of course, race one was leading by quite a significant margin, fighting for that final podium spot overall. Got hit off track, very unfortunate end to their race. But Goat, coming into race two, they're proving to us that wasn't a fluke. They have the pace here to bring home a win.
That said, though, Matt Matcher, another really, really quick driver, and has closed that gap this race as well. So that might be 20 minutes of pressure on Azure there. Going down into the car, we've seen a lot of action there already, and I believe that's the 24 just squeezing in ahead of the 42 of Verona in the M2 Cups. Just quite it's touch and go, but very clean move in the end, getting on by, and that will be the most important thing for Rashinov there. Just making sure that they get through without incident, without taking themselves out or anybody else, and just solidifying that track position. And Martin Lawrence, again, immensely quick, coming onto the main straight. And this is where we'll start seeing the speed difference between the two cars. Lawrence also having fastest lap of the race, it must be said, there in P7. And yeah, it's also running, maybe I want to say a bit less wing as well, because it almost looks like the BMW is struggling a little bit here.
This is a little surprising. How we've seen the BMW so far on the straights, they get on the straight and they just clear one, even two, maybe even three cars, honestly. But Lawrence there, not even being able to overtake Go. I'm wondering if just didn't get the exit they wanted out of the corner just before the straight there. Go going a little bit, I want to say wide, they didn't really. They just more cut wide across the track, come to the inside, and that's going to help Lawrence to keep that gap as tight as possible. But you're right, I think the BMW, how it's performed so far in the race, and now looking at Lawrence driving it, didn't really look like it had the pace that we've seen so far there, but I was going to say something like, oh, right, that's it. Take yourself back to the beginning of this race and also last race, Joshua. And there was one particular car that we were talking about a lot and how much it was surprising us. That was the KTM driven by Samir Foch. Now look at the grid. They're down in 16th. I'm wondering what happened to them. Did they get into an accident and just they found themselves climbing back up now?
Yeah, quite potentially. I mean, looking at it, is that... Okay, I think it's not just my eyes this time. I think I am seeing scrapes down the side of that car, but that could have been just about anything from a slight tap to something a bit heavier. But I mean, if they're not supposed to be carrying damage too. It looks like they're tucking in behind Lilith in the Cayman. Cayman, a very strong car, or another good all-rounder. Not quite as good on the curbs as the BMW. But it's looking like we have a replay coming up, and here we are. So what happened to Samir Foch here? Coming in on Daly, a little bit of a tap. It sent them wide, and at that point you're in no man's land. You can't really move forward or back until you find a gap, and you just sat there waiting. And it seems to be that was just what cost them so much track position in the end. And that's unfortunate to see, but there is still 15 minutes to fight our way through. Andy Boardman on the back of Fisher, looking in the slip, looking to make a move onto the outside, going down into the fast section here. Boardman dropping it. It looks like we pulled it out of the slipstream, lost a bit of forward momentum, allowing Fisher just to take that little bit of extra gap and a little bit more breathing space, but Boardman able to sort of plan another attack.
Oh, look at this exit.
Fisher going wide, but that's going to really help them. Look at the gap forming into here. Boardman compromised oh so slightly. Again, maybe in return here, though, Boardman taking a slightly wider line, able to get the power just a little bit sooner. And this is going to be back and forth, I think, for the foreseeable, until Boardman can find a way around, if Boardman can find a way around.
Well, someone who's hoping it's going to be back and forth is Verstappen, who's actually fallen off the back of the two front runners here. Verstappen, of course, was at one point in first, was at one point heavily competing with Fisher for first. So Verstappen falling back about 1.8 seconds off the rear of the two front runners right now, and they're going to hope that Boardman and Fisher continue to fight, because that's the thing. If Fisher and Boardman, if they continue to fight in corners very close to each other, that's only going to slow them both down. Something else that's going to slow them down, though, Joshua, is something I mentioned just before the start of race 1, which is how the blue flags will come into it and the slower cars on the track. Well, you can see now Fisher, despite leading the race, has a car just ahead of them, and that's because they've approached the first of the back markers. And with 15 minutes left in this race, you can almost guarantee that these back markers are going to be playing a part in who comes out on top.
Oh yeah, I mean, we said this before. You know, you can make so many strategic options by using cars around you. You can box people in. You can overtake in strategic options to force the car behind you to intercept the car behind you. That was a small tap. That was Waldecker just tapping. Who was it? The 24 Rashinov. So yeah, just tapping Rashinov there through there, sending them round. I think Waldecker slowing up, maybe allowing Rashinov to catch up and retake that position, which is kind of the gentlemanly thing to do. But we'll have to see how that one pans out. But that was a slight miscalculation there. As we see Boardman pulling right up, much closer to Fisher this lap round. We saw them catch up here last lap too. It seems to be where the cars do seem to intercept, and it seems to be the 69 and 69 of Boardman just trying to find a way, but they are getting ever so closer to those back markers, as you're saying there, Tim.
Yeah, they're closing in now. As they come through that corner, there's Fisher, there's Boardman, and just ahead of them there are 1, 2, 3 back markers ready to be cleared. Now Fisher needs to make sure they navigate this as quickly as possible, and they need to hope that Boardman behind them doesn't navigate it quite as fast. This can be the difference between who comes out in first and who comes out in second here. You can just see both Fisher and Boardman diving their way through the back markers as quickly as possible, because they both need to clear them as soon as they can. Fisher here has cleared the first lot. Boardman has one more car left to clear, but in terms of round 1 of back markers, Fisher takes the belt. Fisher has navigated them the quickest, and it looks like Fisher will have a bit of a gap now before Boardman pressures them again. Although, saying that, here comes round 2, Joshua. This is the next set of back markers for the 2 GT4s to clear.
It's looking like as well that Fisher's going to get through, and if Boardman can't overtake it through this section, which he hasn't been able to do, these back markers might actually hold them up. going onto the start straight. I mean, look at that. Fisher already has clean air. Boardman getting cut off by the car in front there. The car in front is absolutely entirely entitled to take its position, to take its line. But Boardman having to really wait until the straight to get by, losing time all the while, allowing Fisher to run away. And that means Boardman also loses the slip. That's brought Verstappen back into the mix too. Verstappen coming back into the slipstream of Boardman, and the two might need to work together to catch up to Fisher in the first place.
Well, that is certainly a good turnout of events for Verstappen here, just navigating that traffic so quickly. And like you said, Boardman really struggling, has put Fisher with a nice 1 second gap. So Verstappen now has had a much better exit onto the straight too, it looks like, as they're really closing in on Boardman ahead. Not going to be enough to really combat them going into this corner, but maybe closing in for the next couple of laps. There's still 11 minutes left of race 2 now, and so far we've seen a lot of battling out for these top 3 positions, and I don't doubt for a second that it's over. Honestly, I think they're probably going to catch up to Fisher not so soon, and then they'll be fighting again. Fisher though with a 1.6 second gap. This is probably the first chance Fisher's had to breathe so far in this entire race.
Yeah, I mean, it's half an hour in, and I mean, it's still not over. There's still back markers to go, and you know the traffic ebbs and flows. Just because you get a good run in one instance, it could all come crumbling down in the next. So Fisher still can't breathe easy. Still has to be aware. Still has to pick their moments to overtake, and I did that absolutely amazingly. The first lap round, on the last lap there, just able to kind of use the traffic and put Boardman just behind. And I think that is Martin Lawrence chasing down Azure. This stage in the top 10. You know, they're also catching. Catching the back markers. Back markers coming together. I think that was Waldecker, if I remember correctly. Waldecker, sorry, in the 80, in the orange BMW. I can't quite see from this angle, but that was 2 of the Cup cars that have come together in T1. And I don't know if it's affected anybody else other than those 2, but it looks like some of the front runners have gotten through that unscathed.
That's ideal for Goat there, because Goat was going to have to clear them very shortly, but now has just been able to, well, the clearing was done for them, but now as they go onto the straight, and there you can see the BMW right over the rear of the McLaren already. Martin Lawrence is about to show us exactly what this BMW can do in a straight line, although again I've got to say, it comes back to what you were saying before, Joshua. For some reason Martin Lawrence's BMW does not look as fast as the others on track right now, although Goat has just made a wall in the middle of the straight here. You can see Lawrence look towards the inside, there wasn't a gap there, went to the outside, and still they can't find the gap here either. Going to really try and squeeze their way through into the fast right-hander, but Goat just, well, they've just been amazing on the defense so far, and again making sure to cover the inside so that Lawrence can't go for a dive down. And although it looks like Lawrence now might have just been able to squeeze their way onto the inside here, although is it going to be enough for Goats going a little bit wide off the corner here, rejoining the track, getting ever so close to the 171, but still managing to hold it together side by side. Coming into the final corner here though, the 171 BMW of Lawrence is going to have the advantage. Will the M2 make a difference and hold either of them up? Not enough to help either of the cars out, but it looks like Lawrence is going to make it happen. Funnily enough, in the corners after the straight and not the straight itself. And yeah, I've got to say, Joshua, it keeps coming back to what you were saying earlier. I don't know what it is about Martin Lawrence. Maybe they're riding a bit more wing or something, but they don't look that fast in a straight line compared to the other BMWs right now.
No, not at all. I mean, in terms of lap times, they seem to be quite competitive with the rest. I mean, obviously you see Daly just behind there, and the other BMW as well. But in the background there, but yeah, no. In terms of even having the slip, from Azure for how many laps it's been, they just haven't seemed to have caught up. And that is that Fisher? Is that Fisher being caught up by the back markers? I think Fisher might have lost a little bit of time there, but still massively ahead of the likes of Boardman and Verstappen, and with 7 minutes to go, they're going to have to really pull something out to catch up back to P1.
Fisher, last I saw, was 3 seconds ahead of Boardman, so clearly something went very wrong for Boardman and Verstappen as they tried to navigate the traffic. And you can see now, this is Boardman now that's going for the traffic. Never mind, I was like, wow, Boardman's going fast down the straight there, but it's because the other cars around them was the M2 Cup cars. But you can see Boardman just trying to keep this gap to Fischer as close as possible whilst trying to extend the one to Verstappen behind. And it's not easy. Verstappen gained so much time during the second wave of the M2 Cup cars that were holding them up, and now you can see there's another big group here that's causing a lot of problems. So Boardman's cleared it, but Verstappen's still very much in the mix, and coming through this twisty section as well as two cars there. Number 27, I think that was number 921, came together. We're just going to see in the replay here. 27 is going to make contact with... is that the 91? Yeah, it's the 91 car. Yeah, just 27 catching the inside, and unfortunate for them. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, Verstappen still stuck in the traffic, so that's going to give Bournemouth a slight advantage. Just basically, what they need to do, I'd say the goal is for the next 7 minutes, the remaining 6 minutes 24, is extend the gaps as much as possible with the traffic, because realistically now, I don't think you're getting a good attempt to fight each other. I mean, if Bournemouth and Fischer close that gap again, realistically, there's never going to be a clean bit of air for Bournemouth to go for a move. There's always going to be those M2 backmarkers lurking now.
Yeah, I think maybe just a little bit too far back. Meanwhile, the battle we're watching, I was watching a little bit unfold on my second screen here, as was making a look on the inside of Lawrence, but again, backmarkers, it's just, this is the difference between a lot of the pros and the silvers. The pros will know where you can start using the backmarkers to build a bit of a gap, and Lawrence has gone from being in danger from Azure to being 5 seconds ahead currently, and not only that, has put Azure back into the driver he most doesn't want to be backed into right now, and that's Bart Matcher in the same class running P1 and P2. So for the last 5.5 minutes, this is a fight for the win for Silver class, Tim.
This is, and like we said, both of these drivers just performing so well across both the races, both Bart and Goat. They've just been doing an amazing job. I mean, Azure was winning race 1. They had this nice big gap and then got taken out, which resulted in then Bart Matcher winning race 1. So both of these drivers really have all of it to play for right now as we come into the final 5 minutes. It looks like Bart is going around the outside of Goat here. Not quite going to be able to find it, and Bart is going to have to tuck in behind as they both go wide for now. Got to be careful of the track limits. It's been a big factor in today's races, but Goat once again proving that you can't overtake them, as there has been a wall every time. Even on the straights, there's no way round the 765 McLaren, and again, you can just see Goat continuing to hold off Bart going into the next set of corners. I've noticed that Vondra has just picked up another drive-through penalty, and the reason I'm pointing that out now is that Vondra, I've already seen them once go into the pit lane in this race because they picked up a drive-through earlier on with about 35 minutes to go, and you can see right at the back of the GT4 field here, has just picked up another drive-through. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 track cuts they have done so far. It's something I wasn't expecting a lot of today, but as you said at the end of race 1, it's still a factor in France. You can pick up those track cuts, and they will just appear out of nowhere and get you when you're least expecting it.
That's it, and from driving this track as well, it feels like the boundaries for the track limits are maybe a little bit inconsistent. Like some laps you feel like you can kind of push right up to where the limit should be, and then other laps you can swear that you kept within track limits, but the warning will come up anyway. But the way around that is just to bear that in mind, drive around that I don't want to call it an issue, but drive around that quirk, and just kind of learn to work with it. And being adaptable is a big part of being able to race these cars quickly in any environment that you're given. And that's Waldecker going slightly wide off the curb there. I wonder if he just kind of got a bit launched off the exit curb, because there is a bit of a bump there, and that just sort of sent them wide. And keeping ahead of Hull in the 921, but Hull will have the slipstream going down the straight here.
Yeah, you can see that despite the slipstream, it's not really doing a lot, and that's the problem with these M2. Well, I say it's a problem with the M2 Cup cars. It depends on who you are right now. If you're Hull, it's a problem. If you're racing of it, it's amazing. But these M2 Cup cars, they don't have the slipstream advantage that a lot of the other cars have. You go onto a straight, you're putting your foot down, you have every single thing in your favour, and in any other car you've cleared the car ahead of you by now. But the M2, because their top speed is so lacking and their acceleration as well is not great, slipstream just isn't enough to have effect to take over. And I mean, one thing that we've talked about so much today, Joshua, is how long that straight is and how much benefit you get in the slipstream being on that straight, because you can clear the car ahead of you easily, and then you've just got this nice long gap. That's something that the M2 cars just simply don't benefit from in the same way, because even with the straight, as long as it is, not being able to fit on the camera when it's landscape, it's not long enough for the slipstream to kick in. And in a way, it's a shame, but at the same time, it's a different style of racing, and that's why I love this mix of the GT4s and the M2 Cup together. Is that it's two completely different styles of racing happening at once. One's about momentum, and the other is about that speed on the straight, like normal, and really going for the move into corners. So it's interesting, really, seeing the different fights that happen and the different style of driving in one race.
Yeah, as you said, two very different styles of car. And sorry, I'm just a little bit distracted by the fight going on here, going down into T1. Dito going on the... very adamant about taking the inside into T1 there, running two wheels onto the blue runoff strip there. And it's going side by side, going down to what I believe is turn 3, if you don't count the slight curve in the straight there. And just squeezing ahead and keeping ahead. And it looks like it will stay that way. But yeah, no, I agree, Tim. 100. I agree. Two different styles of racing entirely. You got more aero dependency on the GT4s, nowhere near as much as the GT3s, but you still have the aero dependence of the GT4s, and you have all the mechanical grip in the M2s as well. So it's so much fun. There's a lot going on. I'm sorry. It's even for us in the box, it's hard to keep up.
I mean, there's a lot going on, and something that's going to back up this is I didn't realise that we're in the final minute of the race. We're in the final 30 seconds of the race. Race 2 just shot by, coming down with 20 seconds left. I think we might be on the final lap as well, almost. Actually, I think we're going to see as they cross the line. I think Fisher's not quite crossed the line yet, so I think we're going to do one more. Yeah, we're doing one more lap after this, and it is really going to come down to the line in this race, I think. But again, like you said, there's been so much action. The race has just flown by. I mean, think back to what we've seen at the front. Fisher, Boardman, Verstappen, all fighting it out for that top spot to see who comes out on top. And, well, as you can see, coming into the final lap, Verstappen's currently in third, and I imagine Fisher's still in first, which is Boardman's in second. And they're probably going to continue to push as hard as they can, although I think Fisher is in a nice bit of air now, not having to worry about too much traffic ahead of them. You can see, yeah, 3.4 second gap to Bourman behind, and then a 3.6 second gap to Verstappen. That has really expanded, and it's like we said going into it, Joshua. The M2 traffic, it makes all of the difference in these races.
Oh, it really does, and we've seen that so many times now. This is the KTM Foch going for a move on Lilith, making the most of recovering from that spin earlier on. And last lap, the difference in pace here, it should be fairly straightforward. But don't count Lilith out. Lilith, again, immensely capable when it comes to defending and racing as close as they can. Foch swinging out wide, trying to find a way through. Isn't going to find it in this sequence of corners, but has to really maybe try to do it before the straight. Otherwise, runs the risk of losing out with the superior speed of the Cayman down the straight line, as we've said so many times over the last hour and a half or so since we started the stream. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those moments, even in the box, just trying to get our bearings. Matthew and Azure got still going at it, going down into the bottom end of the course. Azure looks like they're being held up a little bit by one of the Cup cars, but able to put a car between themselves and Bart, which will be great for their race. And then we have Fisher crossing the line to take the win in race 2. So Boardman not able to capitalise from that, but not too far behind. I believe Boardman will be finishing P2, Verstappen P3. How far behind is Verstappen? Did something happen? Because last time we saw them, they were glued together. So I wonder if something's actually happened there, and that almost put Verstappen into the clutches of Kwiat as well.
I think I saw it. I think Verstappen got held up with an extra bit of traffic. So Boardman, I caught this on my second screen as it was happening. Boardman cleared one of the M2s, and then the M2 simply was like still on the apex of the corner. So Verstappen got caught just behind them, and it really put a distance. I think it was only like 1.5 second gap at the time, but then Boardman just because they had that momentum still going, really extended the gap on Verstappen behind. But yeah, as you said, Fischer brings home the second win of today. They've won today's race for race 2. Bournemouth will be second, Verstappen in third. Going down to the silver class, we've got Goat there in first for silver, Bart's in second for silver, and Carlisle has crossed the line in third place. They're rounding out the podium as well. Grim Lilith and Foch, by the way, battling it down to the line. The KTM somehow coming out on top of the Porsche Cayman as Foch manages to put themselves up into 14th overall. Benjamin Harmon, they're going to take home the victory, the second one today for the M2 Cup cars, followed by Dom Healy, who's had an absolutely brilliant day today in both races, and Bock as well will finish third on the podium there. And one thing I was going to say, Joshua, is with the KTM in mind, in race 1 what we saw was Boardman in the Porsche fell to about 12th in the pack, climbed through fairly quickly as they really put the pace in. Foch, who we know had a lot of speed in race 1 in the KTM, couldn't climb because I think they just didn't have the acceleration on the straights and the top speed to overtake, and even though they were going so much quicker in the corners, they didn't have that extra oomph for overtaking power. So I think that's why we've seen Foch there really struggle in race 2 after the incident.
Yeah, again, another thing to consider is just maybe getting a little bit rattled as well. Mental state really kind of comes into these things, and if you're feeling on the back foot for the entire race, then sometimes it's hard to come back from.
It certainly is. Well, that's a wrap on both the races today, everybody. Fischer won both races with what I must say was a very well fought win in race 2 there. We had some very exciting battling across the field. Of course, none of this racing would be able to happen without our partners. We have racedepartment.com. They are your source of sim racing news and mods. AK Informatica provide our server solutions. Driver61, where you can get 25% off your driver coaching. You can use our discount code. The link is in the description. You can redeem it by going to driver61.com. Fanatec, your one-stop shop for the best sim racing equipment. You can use the affiliate link that we have in the description. It's not going to cost you anything, and it helps us with the server cost running these lobbies. Simracing.gp, if you're tired of public lobbies, if you've enjoyed any of the racing that you have seen today, you can join Simracing.gp. They're a quality community-based sim racing group, and they run races in non-public lobbies where you can compete for championships. So you can join them today. It's completely free. You can just hop in, sign up and hop in, and that will be that sorted. Well, Joshua, that is the end of the race at Paul Ricard today. We're off to Monza next week for round 3. And just, well, really to sum up what you've seen today, Joshua, I mean, you called it at the begining. You said you think Goat's going to perform, and Goat did perform, but give me your sum up of how today's races have gone.
I mean, it's a perfect example of, I know we've mentioned this a million times over, but it's a perfect example of how traffic can be used as a tool rather than a hindrance. Fischer proved that as soon as they caught the traffic with Boardman behind, they're just able to kind of pull that gap within 2 or 3 laps. So I think we've seen the importance of how this style of racing can translate to the cars around in a particular position. And beyond that, it's just that it's be able to be versatile. You know, Azure had a great race 1 until it wasn't great, but then able to kind of shrug that off and carry that momentum into race 2. And again, this format of having a short race and a long race immediately afterwards, it's a good opportunity for drivers to sort of figure out how to adapt and approach and getting over any sort of incidents in race 1 and carrying that through into race 2.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's an amazing point you just made about the format of the races as well, which just helps to adapt to the driver's driving ability across both races. Well, if you at home have enjoyed today's race, you may be interested in tuning into one of our other streams. Tomorrow we have the Friday GT3 Championship. It is the season finale, and that will be broadcasted by Stewie. The leader on the comms will be Jesse, and they will be joined by Les Stevenson. That is the final of the Friday GT3 Season 6 Championship. Then we'll be back on Saturday evening for the Night Owl. Mawson will be broadcasting. Jesse will be back on the comms, this time with Ted Edwards in the co-comms seat. They will be navigating you through round 4 of the Night Owl Season 10. Then we'll be back next Monday. This is June the 20th. Ryan Mawson again on the broadcast, this time with Ryan Gill on the comms, and Dalton will be filling out that co-com seat. And then next week, we will be back for the Thursday Season 8 Championship. Christian will be here on the broadcast, and then me and Joshua Devonshire will be back on the comms. And we are, as I've said, coming to Monza, which I'm going to give you a bit of a spoiler, Josh. It's my favourite track of all time. I know it's cliche. I know everyone loves Monza, but the battling that comes out in Monza, the fights that you get on the first corner on the straights, it's so exciting. I love Monza. So if you want to not miss out on this championship, you'll want to join us next week. Make sure you hit the like button on today's video, hit the bell icon as well. That will give you notifications whenever we are planning to go live. And also, if you subscribe to the channel as well, you'll be the first to be notified when we have a race scheduled. We race 3 or 4 times a week, every single race. So there's plenty of racing to go around. And well, to wrap up today's stream, Joshua, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and I hope you've enjoyed the Thursday Championship.
Yeah, well, as I said at the start, and I'm going to reiterate now, thank you for having me. It's been the most fun I think I've had in the box in a very long time, and for the fact I'm out of breath, it goes to show that for us, it's just as amazing. You know, it's great kind of bringing everyone this content, and I mean, I can't wait to do it all over again. Thank you, thanks for having me, Tim.
No problem. I think we have that effect on Thursdays where things tend to get very crazy and we're all out of breath at the end of the day. But thank you very much, Josh, for joining us. And thank you to everyone in the chat as well. Hopefully, we'll see you all next week for Monza. Goodbye.